Hey guys, tonight we're wandering back to ancient Athens, not as distant observers in a textbook, but as sleepy travelers in sandals breathing the morning air of a city made of marble, dust, and noise. The sun is barely up, and you're already part of it, right in the middle of one of history's most alive places. You can smell the mix of olive oil, clay, and goats before you even open your eyes fully. It's the kind of morning that feels older than time itself, and honestly, you probably won't survive this heat wave without a decent amphora of water. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first light over Athens glows faintly pink against the white stone walls of the Acropolis. You're lying on a straw-stuffed mattress in a small, windowless room, a simple clay house near the northern slopes of the city. The walls are cool, the floor swept smooth. Somewhere outside, a rooster has decided to wage war on silence. You stretch, listening to the wooden shutters creak as the day begins to leak in. Your host family has been up for an hour already. You hear sandals shuffling, someone grinding grain with a rhythmic scrape, 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 and the faint hiss of a fire being coaxed to life. The smell of barley porridge fills the air. Not exactly a five-star breakfast, but it'll do. You sit up, tug on your linen chiton, and glance toward the open doorway. The morning light spills in like honey. The air feels both dry and alive. It's the 5th century BCE, and Athens is at its peak. The city hums with energy, democracy, art, trade, gossip, and about 1,000 goats all trying to bleat over each other. You step outside, and the street greets you with a gentle chaos. It's narrow, maybe wide enough for 2 donkeys to pass if they're polite. Stone houses line both sides, their upper floors leaning slightly forward as if eavesdropping on the neighbors. Laundry flaps overhead. Kids dart between doorways, carrying small baskets for errands. You can hear a mother scolding her son in a tone universal to all human history. "Don't touch that, it's dirty." And yes, she's right, it's definitely dirty. The city smells of humanity in all its ancient glory. There's dust, smoke, bread, manure, and something faintly metallic that might be from a nearby smith's forge. The combination is oddly comforting, like history's version of coffee. You start your day's walk downhill, toward the heart of Athens, the Agora. That's where everything happens. The market, the gossip, the philosophy, the business of democracy. All of it swirls together in that open space below the Acropolis. As you step into the flow of morning traffic, you realize just how alive this city feels. Farmers from the countryside trudge alongside citizens in crisp tunics. Slaves hurry ahead with baskets piled high with goods. Merchants push carts. Chickens strut. Somewhere, someone's playing a reed flute, badly. It's easy to forget, but the Agora isn't just a marketplace. It's the beating heart of Athenian life, the original social network, except everyone's talking face to face and no one's arguing in the comments section. You pass a group of men already deep in debate outside a doorway. One of them gestures wildly with a half-eaten fig, proclaiming something about justice or virtue, possibly both. The others nod, then frown, then start arguing back. This, you'll learn, is how Athenians wake up, not with coffee, but with a good philosophical disagreement. A mainstream historical fact here. Historians generally agree that around this time, the Agora wasn't just for trade. It was the nerve center of public life. Government offices stood nearby. The Bula, the council that prepared matters for the assembly, met just a short walk away. If something mattered to the city, it passed through this open square sooner or later. But before you reach that square, you have to pass through the patchwork of narrow lanes that feed into it. And here's where the day really begins to feel ancient. A woman balances a jug on her head while chatting with a neighbor. A slave boy runs past, carrying a basket of figs so full you're certain half will fall before he arrives. Two men haggle loudly over the price of a goat. The goat, unimpressed, bleats in protest. You stop for a moment beside a fountain house, one of several public water sources scattered across Athens. Cool water trickles from the spouts into a stone basin. Women in long peplos dresses fill their clay jugs and gossip quietly about whose husband fell asleep at the symposium last night. You take a sip from your cupped hands. Clean, cold, slightly metallic. Hydration, Ancient Edition. There's a fringe tidbit here, one you might not have heard. Some historians think Athenians occasionally added tiny bits of crushed herbs or even perfume to water stored in certain clay vessels, a primitive attempt at flavoring or masking the taste of old containers. It's debated, but it paints a curious picture of daily life, not just survival, but style. As you keep walking, the city's rhythm grows louder. The sun creeps higher, lighting the limestone walls until they almost glow. The Acropolis looms above everything, a reminder that even while people argue about figs and fish prices, the gods are supposedly watching. Somewhere up there, workmen are still finishing the Parthenon, chiseling marble that will outlive every one of them. You pass a sculptor's workshop on the left, the sound of hammer on stone sharp and steady. He's working on a small relief, maybe for a tomb or a household shrine. Bits of white dust cling to his hair. He glances up as you pass and gives a curt nod before returning to his task. Art isn't separate from life here. It's woven into it, like threads in a tunic. By now, the streets have thickened with people. A pair of soldiers stroll past, their short cloaks swirling red in the breeze. A dog barks at a passing cart. You catch sight of a small boy chasing after it, laughing, and almost colliding with an old man balancing a basket of onions. The man curses softly in Greek, then smiles anyway. Life moves quickly in Athens, but somehow everyone seems to know the rhythm. Historians still argue whether the Agora of the 5th century BCE had fixed zones for each type of vendor, fishmongers in one corner, potters in another, or whether it was more fluid, changing day to day. What's certain is that it was packed, noisy, and endlessly fascinating. You can already hear it before you see it, the creak of wooden carts, the calls of sellers announcing their wares. The air carries a medley of scents: ripe fruit, salted fish, warm bread, smoke from small fires, and the faint tang of bronze coins passing from hand to hand. As you round a final corner, the space opens up like a breath. The narrow lanes spill into a wide, sunlit expanse surrounded by stoas and temples. Marble columns gleam, pigeons flutter, statues cast long shadows across the dusty ground. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, people move like currents in a living sea. You pause at the edge of the Agora, watching it all unfold. The traders setting up stalls, philosophers gesturing dramatically, slaves hurrying to deliver messages, and citizens leaning in to hear the latest rumor about a politician's embarrassing speech. It's overwhelming, but in the best possible way, like standing inside the pulse of civilization itself. You take a slow breath. The sound, the scent, the light, all of it washes over you in waves. You've arrived. The marketplace awaits. You step off the threshold of your quiet lane and begin winding through the streets that funnel toward the Agora. The ground beneath your sandals is uneven, a mixture of packed earth and loose stone. The air carries that particular morning mix of chill and dust that only lasts for an hour or two before the sun decides to remind everyone that Attica is, in fact, a dry peninsula surrounded by salt and glare. As you walk, the city slowly wakes. From doorways, families spill into the streets, mothers sending children on errands, men adjusting their hematia, women balancing woven baskets on their hips. The chorus of sounds is oddly soothing. The murmur of greetings, the bleat of goats, the rhythmic clop of hooves, the occasional crash of a dropped amphora, and the inevitable laughter that follows. The first aroma that really catches you comes from a small bakery tucked between two houses. A boy, no older than 12, works the bellows on a clay oven as his father pulls out round loaves of barley bread, still steaming, crusts browned to perfection. The scent of yeast and smoke makes your stomach do that gentle, ancient growl known to all humans since time began. You buy one loaf for a single obol, the smallest coin in circulation, and tear it open. It's chewy, dense, and just a little gritty. Perfect breakfast, if you ignore the part where half of it's probably made of yesterday's flour sweepings. A few steps later, you pass a row of small stalls built right into house fronts. Here, a woman sells olives stored in clay jars, their surfaces shimmering with oil. Next to her, an older man offers honey sealed in animal skin pouches. The beeswax smell mingles with the brine of olives until it's hard to tell which is sweeter. The vendors greet you with easy smiles. Athenians love conversation even more than profit. Fresh from Hymettus, the honey seller calls. You nod politely, unsure whether that means anything to your modern ears, but you do recall hearing that Mount Hymettus was famous for its honey, even in ancient times. That's a mainstream historical fact. Athenians prized local honey as one of their few true delicacies, drizzling it over bread, cheese, and sometimes even fish. The streets here twist like spilled thread. Some lanes are so narrow you have to turn sideways when a donkey comes through. Occasionally, a shaft of sunlight slices between the roofs, lighting up clouds of dust. Chickens scurry underfoot. From a nearby window, you catch sight of a woman grinding pigments on a flat stone. Reds from iron oxide, blues from crushed azurite. Maybe she's an artisan's wife, preparing colors for pottery decoration.
You pause briefly at a street shrine. It's small, just a weathered pillar with a sculpted face of Hermes set into the wall. Someone's left a little pile of figs at its base, already visited by flies. You murmur a greeting under your breath, not wanting to tempt any bad luck this early in the day. Hermes, after all, is the god of travelers and merchants, and thieves. You'd like to stay in his good books.
Farther along, a group of slaves trundle past, balancing wooden poles with baskets hanging from each end. The baskets clink faintly. Inside are fresh amphora of wine, sealed with clay stoppers. Their master walks behind them, gesturing sharply, complaining about delays. The slaves keep their eyes low, but move quickly. Life here runs on human labor, the unseen machinery behind the city's democratic ideals. You catch yourself thinking about how strange that is. Athens, the birthplace of freedom, powered by people who aren't free. But before you can linger on the thought, the street opens up again. You find yourself in a small square lined with fig trees. Their broad leaves cast cool patches of shade. A few men sit on stone benches, chatting over small clay cups of watered wine. It's still morning, but Athenians never needed an excuse to start sipping early. You overhear a snippet of conversation about the assembly meeting later that day, something about a new grain tax proposal. Fools, one of them mutters, as if the gods care about our taxes. They all laugh, which feels like the ancient version of shrugging at politics. Historians still argue whether the average Athenian lived a comfortable urban life or one constantly teetering on the edge of scarcity. Archaeological finds suggest a mix: modest homes, limited possessions, but an impressive public infrastructure. Wells, fountains, public baths, all designed to make city living possible in the Mediterranean heat. You might not have running water, but you can at least find a communal fountain every few blocks. You pass one now. A cluster of women fill amphora from a carved lion's head spout. The cool trickle of water sings softly beneath their chatter. One woman laughs as another splashes her arm. They're wearing long, belted peploi, their hair twisted into simple braids. One child tries to catch the droplets in her mouth, giggling when she succeeds. It's one of those ordinary scenes that somehow feels timeless. You could see the same playfulness in any century. Just beyond the fountain, the street slopes downward. The scent shifts, less domestic, more industrial. You're approaching the metalworkers' quarter. The air grows warm and metallic. Hammering echoes off the stone walls like a heartbeat. You peer inside one workshop where a blacksmith is shaping the small bronze mirror. Sparks dance in the dim light. A boy works the bellows, cheeks puffed out, determined. On a nearby bench, half-finished tools and trinkets gleam faintly. There's a quirky tidbit about these workshops. Some archaeologists think Athenian smiths occasionally left small charms or carved faces inside the bases of tools and mirrors, like secret blessings or maker's marks. If that's true, somewhere beneath centuries of dust, a tiny grin might still be hiding in the metal of an ancient hammer. You find that thought oddly comforting. You continue on, drawn by the rising hum of the city's core. The lanes grow busier, stalls multiply, the smells get more complicated. Fresh fruit, fish guts, smoke, sweat, perfume, and occasionally, goat. You pass a man selling garlands of flowers. He winks, waves one toward you, and says something about good luck in trade. You buy one for a few lepta and hang it loosely around your neck. It smells faintly of thyme and sea air. At one corner, you catch sight of a small clay figurine lying in the dust, a woman holding a dove. Someone probably dropped it on the way to a shrine. You set it gently on a nearby step, hoping its owner will find it. There's something deeply human about that gesture. Even surrounded by chaos, Athenians notice the small, sacred things. You stop again, this time at a street stall selling wine diluted with cool water from a clay jug. The vendor, a portly man with sun-darkened skin, pours you a small cup. The taste is earthy, slightly sour, but refreshing. He tells you it's from a vineyard near Marathon, where his cousin once fought the Persians. You nod, unsure whether to believe him, but you smile anyway. Everyone here has a story about Marathon. It's like the ancient Athenian version of "My granddad was at Normandy." The road widens now, and a light breeze carries a sound that's unmistakable. Hundreds of voices speaking at once. The Agora is close. You can feel it more than see it. The energy, the expectancy. You pass under a stone archway, its columns worn smooth by countless hands and shoulders. A boy runs by with a clay jug, nearly colliding with you. He shouts an apology over his shoulder, and his laughter trails away like a bell. For a moment, you pause. You glance back up the hill. The Acropolis gleams white against the sky, its temples like frozen sunlight. The city stretches around you, dense, imperfect, alive. The people here don't know they're building something that will echo through millennia. They're just trying to make it to lunchtime. And then, as you take one last step down the sloping street, the buildings part. And there it is again, wider now, brighter, the Athenian Agora. You stand at the edge of the Agora, the vast, sun-splashed heart of Athens. The air itself seems to vibrate here, thick with voices, clinking coins, and the squeak of cartwheels. You take a step forward, and it feels like crossing an invisible threshold. The quiet of the back streets dissolves, replaced by the layered hum of a city in motion. The space opens before you, an enormous, irregular square ringed with stoas, temples, and small shrines. Marble columns gleam in the morning light. Beyond them rise two-story buildings with shaded colonnades where merchants display their wares. Statues stand at attention throughout the square, their bronze limbs green with age. There's one of Hermes, his sandaled feet poised mid-stride, and another of Theseus, gazing toward the Acropolis as if still guarding it from invisible threats. The ground beneath you is dusty, well-trodden, and uneven from centuries of footsteps. You pick your way carefully between scattered stones and market debris. A child darts past you, chasing a runaway olive from someone's basket. while a dog trots proudly with a loaf of bread in its mouth, a classic case of supply meeting demand. All around, the market comes alive. The first sellers have already set up their stalls, wooden tables draped in cloth, baskets piled high with produce, and clay jars lined neatly in rows. Voices rise above the din. Fresh figs, sweet as nectar. Fish from Piraeus, still wet from Poseidon's beard. Oil from my own grove, finest in Attica. The sound bounces off the stone walls and echoes across the open square like a kind of ancient symphony. It's overwhelming, yes, but somehow calming too. The rhythm is so steady, so human, it starts to lull you. There's a hypnotic order to the chaos. Even the arguments seem rehearsed, like a daily ritual that everyone knows by heart. You wander deeper into the crowd. The air grows warmer, scented with figs, garlic, and the sharp tang of bronze. Somewhere nearby, a lyre twangs lazily, perhaps played by a bored musician waiting for better customers. You pass a stall where a man in a sun-bleached tunic weighs small lumps of silver on a hanging balance. His hands move quick and sure, his expression unreadable. Coins clink softly, like metallic rain. Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor the scene. By the 5th century BCE, Athens' Agora wasn't just a marketplace. It was the administrative and spiritual core of the city. The law courts stood nearby, as did the mint, the offices of magistrates, and even a small temple dedicated to Apollo. This wasn't shopping for convenience, it was participation in civic life. Every purchase, every gossip exchange, every overheard debate was part of the democracy's pulse. A line of stone steps leads you toward a raised platform. From here, you can see nearly everything. The vendors, the politicians, the philosophers pacing in shaded stoas. It's a living cross-section of Athenian society. The rich in crisp white linen, the poor in rough wool, the slaves darting between them with quiet efficiency. Everyone has a purpose here, though not always a noble one. You glance to your right and spot a small group of young men loitering near the stoa of Zeus Eleutherios. They're laughing, tossing pebbles into the dust, and occasionally calling out comments about passing strangers. Probably students, or, as their teachers might call them, future disappointments. You overhear one bragging about studying under a philosopher named Socrates. He questions everything, the youth says proudly, even the gods. His friend snorts. He sounds exhausting. You silently agree. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some scholars think the Agora also served as a kind of informal job market. Day laborers might gather here, waiting for someone to hire them for building projects or transport tasks. Imagine standing in this crowd at dawn, hoping a wealthy merchant needs an extra pair of hands to haul amphorae or unload a shipment from Piraeus. Employment, ancient style. No resumes, just calluses. The sun climbs higher. You wipe sweat from your brow. The marble columns reflect blinding white light, and you start to understand why the Athenians favored those broad-brimmed hats that look suspiciously like upside-down bowls. You pass a vendor selling them and consider buying one, but decide your imaginary hair looks great as it is. As you move between stalls, you realize the Agora isn't organized by neat categories. There's logic, but it's flexible. Fishmongers share space with potters. A spice trader might be sandwiched between a cobbler and a scribe selling copies of tragedies. Historians still argue whether official regulations ever dictated who could sell where. Some think there were assigned areas. Others believe it was a free-for-all, governed only by seniority and loud voices. You suspect the latter. A loud shout draws your attention. A man waving a live chicken at another, who appears to be offering him a handful of onions in exchange. The argument is passionate, theatrical, and ultimately resolved when the first man throws in an extra egg.
Trade, negotiation, and poultry diplomacy. Athens in a nutshell.
The crowd swirls around you like a current. You catch glimpses of all kinds of goods, baskets of grapes and pomegranates, clay amphorae sealed with wax, bolts of linen, bronze utensils, carved toys, and even a few jars of imported perfume from Egypt. Everything glitters faintly with sun and dust. You can hear a woman advertising her husband's pottery. Strong enough for wine, pretty enough for your wife. You almost buy one just for the sales pitch.
Near the center of the square stands a line of public notice boards, wooden panels plastered with fresh announcements written in charcoal. You glance at a few. Proclamations from the assembly, names of upcoming trials, lists of runaway slaves, even poetry contests. One corner features small postings for personal items. Lost, 1 ring, plain bronze, sentimental value. It's strangely comforting to know that even in ancient times, people misplaced things constantly.
You stop for a drink at a shaded stall run by a cheerful old woman. She serves kaikion, a barley-based drink mixed with mint and a little honey. It's thick, cool, and surprisingly good. She tells you it's what the farmers prefer. Keeps the sun from stealing your strength. You nod, taking another sip, and she smiles knowingly, the way grandmothers everywhere smile when they know you'll never find a better recipe.
A donkey brays nearby, shaking its head as a merchant piles too many baskets onto its back. You watch as the man mutters curses about lazy beasts, while the donkey gives him the side eye of a creature who's seen it all before. In the distance, someone laughs, probably at the same scene. You realize how communal laughter is here. It ripples through the air like a shared language.
One of the most fascinating aspects of this place, and a point of endless debate among scholars, is how the Athenians maintained order. With thousands of people crowding into a relatively small area, who stopped theft? Who kept prices fair? Some say appointed market officials called Agora oversaw everything, from weighing goods to checking coin purity. Others think the rules were more casual, enforced by reputation and public shaming. In a society where everyone knew everyone, a single accusation of dishonesty could ruin your stall for good. You wander toward the far edge of the Agora, where the crowds thin a little. A breeze catches your tunic, carrying with it the smell of roasted nuts and something sweet, honey cakes. You spot them cooling on a flat clay tray. The baker waves you over. You buy one, still warm, and take a bite. The honey sticks to your fingers. The crust crumbles gently, and you instantly forgive every wrong in the world. A few pigeons eye you hopefully, so you toss them a crumb. They squabble over it with the same energy politicians reserve for public debates. Somewhere a child laughs again. Life goes on, simple and cyclical. You find a shaded spot under a stoa column and sit for a while, letting the world spin around you. The sound of the marketplace rises and falls like the tide. The marble beneath you is cool, smooth from centuries of use. You can feel history under your fingertips, worn into the stone by countless hands like yours. Athens may be old, chaotic, and loud, but sitting here, watching sunlight flicker across the faces of strangers, you realize there's something eternal about this place. People come and go, empires rise and fall, but the human desire to gather, to trade, to talk, it never fades.
You take another slow breath, letting the air fill your lungs. The Agora hums. Somewhere nearby, someone begins to play a flute again, this time softly, gently, like a lullaby for the city itself.
The crowd thickens as you drift toward the scent of food. The heart of the market, it seems, beats loudest where the stomach leads. You follow the wafting aroma of grilled fish and warm bread through a blur of voices until you arrive at the food vendor's corner, a maze of small stalls, low tables, and open braziers where Athens eats, talks, and laughs all at once. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Olive oil sizzles on hot stone. Honey drips over roasting nuts. Somewhere is frying something that smells suspiciously like squid and bravery. Smoke rises in lazy spirals, catching in the morning light. If you weren't awake before, you are now. You weave between the stalls, dodging a slave carrying a tray of figs and a woman balancing a basket of eggs on her head with impossible grace. The sounds are intoxicating. Vendors calling out in rhythmic chants, coins clinking, the crackle of fire, the splash of water from a fishmonger's bucket. It's as though the entire city is breathing through this one corner. You stop at a table piled high with olives, plump, glistening, some green, some black, all marinated in earthen jars of brine. The vendor, a broad man with a beard that looks like it could store secrets, gestures with pride. "Straight from my grove near Megara," he says, thumping his chest. "The trees there drink better sunlight." You don't know what that means, but you nod as if you understand all of hydration. You buy a handful wrapped in a fig leaf. They taste sharp, salty, and clean, like the essence of the Mediterranean distilled into a bite. A few stalls down, a woman stirs a pot over a small fire. The steam smells faintly of garlic and herbs. You ask what she's making, and she grins. "Lentil stew," she says, "the food of philosophers." You chuckle, imagining Socrates slurping it between arguments about virtue. That's actually a mainstream historical fact. Athenians did love their lentil soup, cheap and filling, often flavored with vinegar or leeks. You sip a small bowl, and it's earthy and simple, the culinary equivalent of wisdom in comfortable sandals. The food area hums with energy. You hear the sizzle of fish hitting hot coals, the pop of bread bubbles from a flat griddle, the chatter of cooks teasing their customers. "Eat now," one man says, flipping a skewer of meat. "Later, you'll only argue about it." You pause at a baker's stall, where round loaves are stacked like golden shields. He sprinkles sesame seeds over fresh dough and slides it into a clay oven glowing orange. The air is thick with that irresistible smell of yeast and fire. Bread here isn't just food, it's currency, comfort, and community all at once. A loaf could feed a family or seal a deal. The baker smiles and offers you a small roll, still steaming. You bite into it, and the crust crackles softly. Warm crumbs melt on your tongue. A few children dart between the stalls, laughing, their fingers sticky with honey. One stops, wide-eyed, to watch a cook toss fish in oil. The cook winks and flicks a drop of hot oil onto the stone, making it hiss dramatically. The children squeal, impressed. You remember when even the smallest magic felt infinite. Further on, a fishmonger splashes water over his display to keep it fresh. Silver-scaled mackerel, red mullet, and small squid lie arranged in tidy rows. He waves a hand at you. "Caught at dawn," he shouts. "Poseidon himself couldn't find better." You crouch for a closer look, trying not to breathe too deeply. The fish glisten under the sunlight, eyes clear, flesh firm. You nod appreciatively, though your stomach isn't entirely convinced. There's a quirky tidbit about Athenian seafood culture. Apparently, fishmongers were considered notorious gossip hubs. Some comic playwrights mocked them for overcharging or flirting with customers while weighing their goods. So when you see this man leaning close to a passing woman and whispering something about free sardines for a smile, you realize comedy wasn't exaggerating much. You wander toward another table where small pastries rest under a linen cloth. The woman selling them lifts the corner to reveal honey cakes shaped like tiny suns. "Made this morning," she says proudly. You buy one, bite into it, and the taste is heavenly, sweet, crumbly, with the faint crunch of sesame beneath the honey glaze. It's the kind of flavor that makes time feel irrelevant. Historians still argue whether common Athenians ate meat regularly or saved it mostly for festivals. Most evidence suggests it was rare, reserved for sacrifices and public feasts. So, when you spot a vendor skewering thin slices of goat meat and roasting them over charcoal, you realize you're witnessing a small luxury. He sprinkles sea salt and wild thyme as it sizzles. The aroma is enough to make philosophers question asceticism. Nearby, an elderly man sells cheese from wicker baskets, soft, crumbly, and wrapped in fig leaves. "From goats," he says, tapping his chest proudly. "My goats! They sing when I milk them." You blink, unsure whether that's a boast or a warning, but you buy a wedge anyway. It's tangy and creamy, perfect with a bite of that fresh bread still warm in your hand.
You find a shaded spot at the edge of the food stalls, beneath the wooden awning of a spice cellar. The air here feels thick and exotic. Clay jars line the table, each labeled in faded ink. The merchant lifts one lid, releasing the scent of cinnamon. Another reveals dried coriander, cumin, and peppercorns black as obsidian. He tells you some come from Egypt, others from lands beyond the sunrise. Trade routes stretching across deserts and seas have somehow delivered these treasures to the center of Athens. You imagine the caravans and ships, the endless movement of goods and ideas, ancient globalization in motion. You chat with him for a while, and he lets you sniff something sharp and citrusy. "Saffron," he whispers reverently, "worth its weight in gold." He's not exaggerating. Saffron was one of the most valuable commodities of the ancient world. You half-jokingly ask how he keeps thieves away, and he grins. "I sleep with my jars," he says. "No wife, but a lot of spice." You decide not to ask for clarification. From where you sit, you can watch the flow of the Agora like a slow-moving river. A messenger darts past with a scroll tucked under his arm. A group of soldiers stop for wine and laugh too loudly. Two old women argue over the price of onions with a vigor that could shame any courtroom debate. The air is alive, not just with trade, but with connection. A small breeze picks up, carrying the mingled sense of herbs, smoke, and humanity. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it wash over you. Somewhere behind you, a lyre starts to play a soft, lazy tune. The notes float through the marketplace like sunlight through dust. For just a moment, the chaos feels like harmony. When you open your eyes again, the baker is shouting at a stray dog that's stolen a roll. The dog trots away victoriously, tail wagging, crumbs flying. The baker sighs, mutters something about divine punishment, then shrugs and starts kneading a new batch. Life continues, round as the bread he shapes. You take one last slow walk through the food stalls, brushing fingertips over baskets of fruit, watching the merchants pack away early sales, and listening to the rhythm of everyday conversation. It's strangely hypnotic. The measured pace of hands, the calm repetition of words, the ritual of exchange. In a world without clocks, this rhythm is time itself. By the time you leave the food vendor's corner, your stomach is content, your mind drifting pleasantly, and your hands faintly sticky with honey and oil. The morning heat is settling in, and the sunlight has turned the marble columns into mirrors. Somewhere beyond the next row of stalls, the clatter of pottery begins to echo, a new kind of music calling you forward. You wipe your hands on your tunic, take a deep breath scented with thyme and smoke, and wander toward the potter's quarter, ready to see how the city shapes clay into art. The sound reaches you before the sight does, a steady hum of scraping, tapping, and spinning. As you round the corner of the Agora, the tone of the air shifts. The smell of food fades behind you, replaced by the earthier scent of clay and dust, mingled with the faint tang of smoke from nearby kilns. You've entered the potter's quarter, where Athens molds its memory into shape. Here, artisans work with the patience of the gods they paint.
The street is alive with rhythm, the slap of wet clay against the wheel, the squeak of foot pedals, the gentle rasp of brushes painting scenes of heroes and feasts. Sunlight filters through a haze of dust, turning the air golden. Every surface seems coated in a thin film of reddish powder, on clothes, hands, even beards. It's as if the craftsmen are half made of the earth they shape. You stop at the first workshop, an open-fronted stall where a young man crouches before a turning wheel. His foot pumps the pedal smoothly, keeping the clay spinning at a hypnotic pace. His hands, strong, scarred, and steady, guide the soft mound into form. You watch as a pot begins to rise, slender and elegant, like a living thing waking up. The transformation is quiet magic. He doesn't look up as he speaks, his voice calm and rhythmic with the wheels turning. "You must learn to listen to it," he says, as if sensing your fascination. Clay talks. Too much water, and it complains. Too little, and it cracks. But when it's right... He dips his fingers in a small bowl of water, smoothing the rim. When it's right, it breathes. He lifts his foot, and the wheel slows. The amphora now stands perfect, the neck curving upward like the stem of a flower. He smiles faintly, pride glimmering through the clay dust. "It will hold oil," he says. "Maybe wine. Maybe dreams." Behind him, shelves are lined with dozens of finished vessels, some plain, some painted, some still drying in the shade. The reddish-brown color comes from the Attic clay, famous across the ancient world for its richness. It's this same earth that gives Athenian pottery its distinct hue, the color of sunrise mixed with time. A little further down, another craftsman paints a scene onto a wide crater, the kind used for mixing wine at symposiums. His brush is made from a thin reed, and the black pigment glides effortlessly over the terracotta surface. You peer closer. Tiny figures emerge, a charioteer mid-race, a pair of athletes wrestling, a reclining man holding a cup. The detail is astonishing, almost impossibly fine. He notices you watching and chuckles. "The trick," he says, without pausing his hand, "is to remember that these men are not just lines. They have breath in them. When I paint, I think of the story they tell." You ask him how long it takes to finish one, and he shrugs. Days for the shape, a lifetime for the art. Then, leaning in slightly, he adds in a conspiratorial tone, "But the firing is the true test. The kiln is a god of its own. You pray, and sometimes it listens." You realize then how fragile this work is, how easily heat or air could ruin everything. Yet they keep doing it, every day, hands steady, hearts patient. It feels like devotion. The kiln itself sits behind the stalls, its mouth dark and silent for now. When lit, it can reach temperatures that turn raw clay into something eternal. You imagine the glow at night, the faint roar of flame, and the men keeping watch like priests tending a sacred fire. There's something timeless about it, the human desire to make beauty from mud, permanence from dust. You wander deeper into the quarter. Each stall tells its own story. A carver shaping marble fragments into tiny votive figurines. A jeweler threading gold wire through beads of amber and bone. A craftsman engraving bronze mirrors that catch the sun and throw it back in soft sparks. Everywhere there's motion and purpose. You pause beside a woman who sells painted oil lamps, small, delicate, and shaped like seashells. She's smoothing one with a cloth as you approach. "For the home," she says softly. "For light, or love, or both." She points to the design etched on its side, a pair of dolphins leaping beneath a crescent moon. "It's lucky," she adds. "The sea keeps us humble." You buy one, feeling its cool weight in your hand. It's smooth and simple, yet carries the sense of something deeply human, the desire to hold light. As you continue, you pass a group of children gathered around an older potter, his hair white as marble dust. He's shaping a small bowl and explaining something in a voice rough but kind. The wheel doesn't rush for anyone, he says. You turn it slow, like the seasons. The clay remembers your patience. The children giggle as he lets one of them press a thumb into the soft surface. There, he says, now you've left your mark on the world. You can't help but smile. The Agora is full of grand talk about philosophy and politics, but here, wisdom seems quieter, shaped by fingers rather than words. A gust of wind sweeps through the street, stirring up clay dust into a shimmering cloud. For a moment, everything blurs. The potters, the stalls, the jars. You think of how many such clouds have risen over Athens across the centuries, and how many more will rise after. Nearby, two artisans argue good-naturedly about prices. My vase shows Achilles himself, one insists. Yours barely has a satyr worth the paint. The other laughs. Then sell it to a poet. They'll believe anything. Their laughter mingles with the hum of work, creating a kind of music that belongs entirely to this place. You stop again at a workshop where a young apprentice mixes slip, a watery clay used for painting, under the supervision of his master. The boy looks nervous, carefully stirring the mixture. The older man watches him for a moment, then says, "Not too fast, let it think." You realize it's not just the craft that's passed down here, but a way of seeing the world, patient, attentive, reverent. On the wall behind them hang broken shards of pottery, old, discarded, perhaps mistakes. Yet even those fragments have beauty, painted edges that once belonged to larger stories. Athens itself, you think, is built from such fragments, pieces of lives, art, and ideas that together make something whole. As midday approaches, the sunlight hardens. The artisans pause their work, wiping sweat from their brows. Someone brings out a jug of watered wine, and they gather in the shade for a brief rest. You sit nearby, sharing the quiet moment. The air hums softly with the faint echo of flies and distant chatter from the food stalls. One potter lifts his cup in a lazy toast. "To clay," he says, smiling, "the only thing that listens better than men." They laugh, and for a while, the noise of the market seems far away. You sip your own cup of watered wine, cool and faintly sour. The breeze carries the scent of baked earth and smoke. Everything feels slow, gentle, timeless. You think of how many generations have shaped this same clay, breathed this same dust, looked at their hands and seen the same red stains. As you rise to leave, you glance back at the rows of pots, jars, and lamps drying in the sun. The light turns their surfaces into shades of gold and amber. Some will end up in grand houses, others buried with their owners, others shattered and forgotten. Yet for now, they sit together in perfect stillness, waiting for purpose. You step out of the potter's quarter, brushing dust from your tunic. The faint hum of voices grows louder again as you re-enter the main agora. Ahead, you can already see bright fabrics fluttering in the breeze, traders' tents from faraway lands. The smell shifts once more, this time toward spice and sea. Your path leads next to the merchants from distant shores, where the world itself seems to gather in one place. The road widens again, opening into a sunlit corner of the agora, where color seems to have exploded. Fabrics ripple in the breeze, dyed in shades of crimson, indigo, and gold. The hum of voices grows denser here, a polyglot murmur of languages that don't all sound Athenian. You've arrived at the merchant's stalls, the true crossroads of the Mediterranean world. It's easy to forget, in the shadow of the Parthenon, that Athens isn't just a city, it's a port power. Piraeus lies a few miles away, its harbor packed with ships bringing goods from Egypt, Cyprus, Phoenicia, and beyond. Every amphora, every crate, every bundle of cinnamon or silk finds its way here, into the hands of traders with practiced smiles and sharp eyes. You can feel it in the air, the pulse of commerce, the thrum of distant journeys. You start with the scent that pulls strongest, a spicy warmth, unfamiliar yet irresistible. A merchant from Phoenicia waves you over with a grin. His stall is overflowing with small sacks of cinnamon, cardamom, and pepper, their smells blending into a heady perfume. "Straight from Tyre," he declares proudly, though you suspect half of it has made several stops since then. The gods themselves would trade their ambrosia for this. You pick up a small jar of myrrh, the resin glinting like honey in the sun. He explains how it's burned in temples, used to scent oil, even to preserve the dead. You nod politely, half wondering if anyone has tested that last claim firsthand. He leans closer conspiratorially. Some say it also keeps away evil spirits, but only if you pay full price. You both laugh, and for a moment, commerce feels like friendship. Historians still argue whether Athenian markets were truly cosmopolitan or just cleverly local, whether the majority of exotic goods actually came from abroad or from clever local imitations. Archaeological evidence shows both. Genuine imports mixed with Athenian replicas, proving that imitation really was the sincerest and most profitable form of flattery. Moving along, you find a row of stalls selling textiles. The fabrics shimmer as they sway. Egyptian linen, soft and fine. Heavy Ionian wool dyed purple with murex, the famous sea snail pigment worth its weight in silver. You reach out to touch one piece, smooth as river water. The merchant, a wiry man with sunburned arms, watches you with the sharp patience of someone who spent his life haggling. "Good eye," he says. "That one came from Naucratis, finest weave in Egypt. It'll last longer than your marriage." You smile awkwardly, pretending to inspect the stitching instead of addressing his oddly specific prediction. He drapes the cloth over your shoulder, letting it fall with practiced flair. The purple catches the light, deep as twilight. "You'd look like a magistrate," he says, then leans in, lowering his voice. "Or at least someone who owes one money." You can't help but laugh, and he laughs too, because here, laughter is currency. As you move on, the stalls grow more varied. There are jars of olive oil, glistening like liquid sunlight, heaps of salt from distant islands, baskets of figs, almonds, and dried fish, even a table of small carved idols, Athena, Apollo, Demeter, each with faintly crooked smiles. A group of sailors stand nearby, their clothes smelling faintly of tar and seaweed. They're arguing loudly in a mix of Greek and something else, perhaps Egyptian, perhaps Cypriot. One of them notices you watching and grins. "Careful, traveler," he says. "If you stay here long enough, you'll start trading your sandals for spices." You reply that you'll need your sandals to walk home. He shrugs. "Then you'll walk home smelling excellent." Farther on, a small crowd gathers around a man selling glassware. The glass is delicate, almost impossibly thin, shimmering in hues of green and blue. He demonstrates by holding one up to the light. Sunbeams fracture through it, scattering like tiny rainbows. A collective "ah" escapes the onlookers. "Imported from Sidon," he declares. "You won't find this craft in Athens yet." He's partly right. Glass blowing is still a rare art in this century. Most Athenians drink from clay or bronze, but glass, fragile as it is, holds a fascination like modern-day smartphones. Expensive, impractical, and impossible not to want. You catch a whisper behind you. Two locals debating whether it's worth buying. "Too delicate," one says. "One drop and it's gone." The other smiles. "That's the point. It reminds you not to be clumsy." Philosophical shopping advice, Athenian edition. There's a quirky tidbit about this part of the market. Ancient graffiti found on stone walls near the Agora include doodles of ships, price lists, and even crude jokes about bad merchants. One scratch line reads something like, "Don't buy from Lysias. His figs have more worms than fruit. So evidently, bad reviews existed long before Yelp. You drift toward a stall displaying pottery unlike anything you've seen so far. The designs are strange. Bold shapes, animals, and symbols that look almost Egyptian. The merchant, tall and wrapped in a linen robe, introduces himself as Jedhor from Memphis. He speaks Greek with a lilting accent. "We bring these by river and sea," he says, tracing one finger along a painted ibis. "Each carries a prayer for safe passage." You ask if the ibis is sacred, and his face softens. "To Thoth," he says, "the god of wisdom. Perhaps your Athena would understand him." You nod, appreciating the bridge he builds between worlds. You buy a small plate decorated with a lotus. It's oddly calming to hold, a fragment of another civilization now resting in your hand. You tuck it into your pouch and move on. Near the edge of the merchant row, a commotion draws your attention. Two traders, one Athenian and one foreign, are in a heated debate. You can't catch every word, but it's clearly about price or pride. The foreigner gestures toward his goods, shouting that his incense is pure. The Athenian, arms crossed, insists it's watered down with sand. A small crowd gathers, half to mediate, half for entertainment. Eventually, a gray-bearded man steps in, murmuring calm words. The argument fades, replaced by laughter and a handshake. Someone claps. You hear one of them joke, "See, even our fights are profitable." Historians still argue whether markets like this were truly places of equality or quietly segregated by citizenship. Foreign merchants, or medics, could trade but not vote or own land. Yet in this moment, watching them bargain, you sense that profit transcends politics. The Agora, for all its rules, feels like a leveler. Everyone here is just trying to make a living. You stop for a moment to take it all in. The air is thick with scent, resin, smoke, salt, sweat, perfume, and the faint musk of animals. Voices rise and fall in a strange harmony. Somewhere a flute plays. The sound weaves through the market like a soft breeze, almost like background music for commerce. A merchant offers you a small fig stuffed with almonds. You bite into it, sweet, sticky, with a nutty crunch. "Best from Chios," he says proudly. You nod, though at this point you suspect everything is best from somewhere. Still, it's delicious. As the afternoon wears on, the light softens, slanting gold across the square. You notice the way it turns amphorae into warm lanterns and glazes the faces of merchants in bronze hues. The crowd thins slightly as people wander toward shade, though the deals never stop. Commerce in Athens is as eternal as gossip. You find a shaded corner and watch the bustle. A donkey brays. A child chases a rolling pomegranate. A woman haggles fiercely over a piece of wool, pretending to walk away before triumphantly returning when the merchant calls her back. There's comfort in this ordinary chaos. The world feels smaller here. Egypt and Athens, Persia and Phoenicia, all meeting in one patch of sunlit dust. The hum of trade becomes almost meditative. Each deal, each exchange feels like part of a heartbeat that has pulsed through cities for thousands of years. As you stand to leave, a merchant calls out, "Hey, traveler, you forgot to buy luck." He holds up a small charm, a bronze coin strung on a cord, for safe journeys. You smile, drop a coin into his hand, and tie the charm loosely around your wrist. The charm glints faintly as you step back toward the center of the Agora. Somewhere nearby, a crier's voice rises above the crowd, announcing a public meeting, perhaps, or a speech. Politics and philosophy wait just beyond these stalls, but for now, the scent of spices still clings to your clothes, a quiet souvenir of the world that gathers in Athens. As you drift back toward the heart of the Agora, the tone of the air shifts again. The shouts of merchants fade behind you, replaced by a different kind of noise. Voices layered not in bargaining, but in argument. The low hum of minds colliding. You're approaching the philosophical quarter, where Athens does its favorite thing besides trading, talking. Here, words are the currency, and everyone's a millionaire. The space looks deceptively ordinary. A few shaded colonnades, some stone benches, a scattering of olive trees. But the energy is unmistakable. Men in simple cloaks stand in loose circles, gesturing with half-eaten figs or rolled-up scrolls, their tones ranging from patient to theatrical. It's not shouting exactly, it's the kind of raised voice that insists on being heard by everyone within 50 paces. You wander closer, slipping between listeners. One speaker, a tall, angular man with a voice that could probably start wars, is holding court beside a pillar. Virtue, he proclaims, is not what you do, but what you know. His audience murmurs approval, except for one skeptical listener in the back who mutters, "Try telling that to my wife." A few chuckles ripple through the crowd, and even the speaker smirks. It's almost impossible to move 10 steps here without brushing up against a debate. One group argues whether courage can be taught. Another discusses whether the gods care about human justice. A third is deep in conversation about geometry, tracing lines in the dust with sticks. You realize that, for Athenians, thinking isn't a private act, it's a public sport. You pause at a cluster of young men gathered around a short, stocky figure with a strangely magnetic calm. He's barefoot, bald on top, and smiling in that infuriating way people smile when they know they're about to win an argument. You've just stumbled upon Socrates. He's not speaking loudly. In fact, his tone is almost conversational. "Tell me, my friend," he says to a flustered youth, "you say that justice is giving each man what he deserves. But how do you know what he deserves?" The young man frowns, opens his mouth, closes it again. Socrates waits, silent and patient, like a fisherman letting the line slacken. Finally, the student mutters, "Well, that depends." "Ah," Socrates says, eyes twinkling. "Then justice depends. Excellent. We've learned something already." The group bursts into laughter, the poor student included. It's strange. You've read about Socrates before, perhaps even quoted him in an essay you didn't fully understand. But here, he's different. Less marble statue, more mischievous uncle. There's warmth beneath the challenge. You can almost see how he inspires loyalty and irritation in equal measure. A merchant passing by mutters, "That man will talk the city into madness one day." History, of course, will prove him partly right. Historians still argue whether Socrates truly existed as the man Plato described, or whether he was partly an invention, a voice through which Plato spoke his own ideas. Either way, his presence here feels undeniably real. The dusty air around him hums with thought. You drift away before your brain overheats and find another group nearby. This one's gathered around a platform where an orator is practicing for the assembly. He's tall, muscular, with a voice like thunder and a talent for gesturing dramatically toward the sky. "Citizens of Athens," he bellows, though there are only about 12 people watching. "We must remember that freedom is not given, it is guarded." The small audience claps politely, and one old man yawns. You're fairly sure this is the Athenian version of open mic night. It's worth remembering that in Athens, public speaking is more than performance. It's a survival skill. A man's reputation, his influence, even his legal defense depends on his ability to persuade. There are no lawyers here, no professional advocates. If you can't speak well, you might as well not exist. At another end of the square, you notice a group of older men sitting cross-legged on the ground, discussing ethics over watered wine. They look content, like cats in the sun. One of them waves you closer. "You there, traveler, what's your opinion? Does happiness come from pleasure or moderation?" You pause, uncertain how to answer. "Both?" you offer cautiously. He grins. Excellent. You'd make a fine Epicurean. The man next to him shakes his head. Nonsense. He'd make a terrible Epicurean. He's thinking too hard about it. They laugh, clinking their cups. The debate continues, good-natured and endless. You move again, letting the rhythm of conversation wash over you. Everywhere, voices rise and fall in the drowsy afternoon heat. Some arguments are scholarly. Others sound suspiciously like gossip. You catch one man whispering, I hear Democritus claims everything's made of invisible atoms. Invisible! Can you imagine? His friend scoffs. Ridiculous. Next he'll say the Earth floats in space. You smile. From your vantage point in the modern world, you know they'll both be right eventually. But for now, they argue in good faith, chasing truth through words the way children chase shadows. There's a quirky tidbit about this part of the Agora. Archaeologists found a series of inscribed stones that might have served as a kind of public message board. People left announcements, jokes, even crude philosophies scrawled in wax. One fragment reads, roughly translated, Anytus talks too much, but his olives are fine. Proof perhaps that Athenian humor had no off switch. You find yourself drawn to a quieter edge of the square, where a single man stands reading aloud from a scroll. The listeners are fewer here, mostly apprentices and scribes, but the tone is hypnotic. He's reciting something rhythmic, almost poetic. It's Homer. The verses tumble out in waves, gods, ships, heroes. The listeners sway slightly, caught in the cadence. You can see why this culture reveres words so deeply. Here, language isn't just communication, it's creation. A light breeze stirs the olive trees, scattering a few leaves across the flagstones. The sound mixes with the low murmur of debate, creating a kind of intellectual lullaby. You sit for a moment on a low stone bench, letting the voices blur into background music. You think about how extraordinary this is, an open space where anyone can challenge anyone, where knowledge isn't locked in temples but spoken freely under the sky. There's something utopian about it, even if it's also messy and loud. Ideas here are alive, jostling, evolving. And yet, beneath the harmony, you sense a hint of danger. Words have weight in Athens. The same freedom that fuels this debate also fuels suspicion. You recall that not everyone loves these questioners. For every mind opened by philosophy, another feels threatened by it. One man nearby mutters to his friend, "If my son starts asking why justice exists, I'll send him to Sparta." His friend laughs. Good luck getting him to stop asking questions first. The sun dips slightly, and shadows stretch across the square. The philosophers begin to disperse, some heading toward taverns, others to private gardens. A few linger, still locked in friendly argument, waving their hands as though trying to physically shape the air. You stand, brushing dust from your clothes, and realize how different the Agora feels now. You've passed through trade, craft, and philosophy, each corner its own world. You start to see how all of Athens is built on conversation, between merchants and buyers, artists and patrons, thinkers and skeptics. The city itself is one great dialogue. Before you leave, you glance back toward the column where Socrates still stands, now surrounded by fewer listeners. He's leaning on one foot, smiling faintly as he asks yet another impossible question. The golden light catches the edges of his face, turning him almost translucent, like an idea about to dissolve into memory. You turn away, carrying the echo of his voice with you, a reminder that thought, once spoken, never really disappears. It just changes shape, like clay on a wheel, waiting for another hand to mold it. By late afternoon, the streets of Athens begin to hum with a new kind of excitement. The air feels lighter, more expectant, and the conversations you pass grow animated. You follow the flow of people heading uphill toward the southern slope of the Acropolis, where a wide semicircle of stone comes into view, the Theater of Dionysus. It's vast and breathtaking, even in its simplicity. Rows of limestone benches sweep upward like waves frozen in time, wrapping around a circular stage, the orchestra. From here, the view of the city stretches out in the hazy distance, the blue shimmer of the sea just visible beyond the rooftops. The crowd gathers early. You find a place on the cool stone, somewhere in the middle rows. The seats aren't numbered. It's first come, first served, though the front few rows are reserved for priests and dignitaries. A boy selling figs passes by, shouting over the noise, while a woman with a tray of honey cakes moves carefully between the benches. A thin mist of dust floats in the sunlight. The air smells faintly of olive oil, sweat, and baked earth. You look around and realize that this theater isn't just a place for entertainment, it's the beating heart of Athenian public life. On festival days, nearly every citizen comes here. Farmers, merchants, soldiers, philosophers, even slaves and foreigners. The city stops working and gathers to watch stories unfold, stories that are as much about themselves as they are about gods or heroes. As you settle in, a hush ripples through the crowd. The chorus enters, a group of men in masks moving in slow rhythm to the sound of a flute. The masks are exaggerated, their mouths open wide to project the voice. The music swells and the play begins. At first, the style feels strange, stylized, formal, almost ritualistic. But then something clicks. The gestures, the rhythm, the solemn poetry. It all feels hypnotic, like watching a dream being spoken aloud. You're witnessing the magic of Greek tragedy. The play tells of Orestes, torn between revenge and guilt, haunted by the gods for avenging his father's death. Every movement, every line of dialogue seems to echo some deeper truth about human struggle and divine justice. The chorus chants in perfect harmony. Who among mortals escapes the shadow of grief? The sound vibrates through the stone, deep and resonant. Around you, the audience is completely still. These are the same citizens who argued loudly in the Agora, who traded olives and ideas, but here they are one collective listener, breathing as a single being. The Greeks believed that tragedy was more than entertainment. It was catharsis, the purging of emotion, a way to confront fear, pity, and fate in a safe, communal space. It's astonishing to realize how much of modern drama, even film, descends from this ancient art. The structure, the moral questions, the flawed hero, they all began here, in this open-air theater under the sun. When the performance ends, the applause isn't clapping, it's the stomping of feet on stone. The sound rolls like thunder across the hillside. The actors bow, still masked, and the spectators begin to disperse, talking in animated bursts. You linger as the crowd thins, watching the sunset spill across the Acropolis above. From here, you can see the Parthenon catching fire in the golden light, every column glowing like a candle. But the day isn't over. Athenian festivals go on long after the plays end. Tonight, the streets will fill again with music, torches, and wine. You follow the crowd down into the lower streets, where the festival of Dionysus continues. The god himself, Dionysus, patron of wine and theater, would be pleased. Everywhere, people sing, dance, and laugh. Some wear garlands of ivy, others carry small statues of the god on poles. A group of men dressed as satyrs prance by, their laughter contagious. The festival isn't just a celebration, it's an offering. The Athenians believed joy itself was sacred, a tribute to the divine. Even the city's laws required the wealthy to sponsor festivals and pay for performances, ensuring that art was not a luxury but a civic duty.
You pause at a small courtyard where a group of musicians plays pipes and lyres. The sound is bright and lilting, winding through the night air like smoke. People gather around, clapping in rhythm. A young woman dances, her white robe twisting like liquid light. She's not a performer, just a reveler caught in the spirit of the night. Beyond the music, another crowd forms around a storyteller. He stands beside a flickering torch, his face half lit as he spins tales of gods and monsters, Perseus and Medusa, Heracles and his labors, Orpheus descending into the underworld. The listeners lean in, spellbound, as though hearing them for the first time.
It strikes you how oral tradition binds this city together. Before writing, before books, it was through stories like these that culture survived. Every tale is a thread in the tapestry of Athens' identity, woven through generations, embroidered with belief. As the hours pass, the tone of the night shifts. The laughter grows softer, the songs slower. Some people sit by small oil lamps, sharing bread and wine, talking in low voices about the play they saw earlier. Even in their leisure, Athenians think deeply.
An old man nearby says to his friend, "A good tragedy doesn't tell us what's right or wrong. It shows us that the gods might not care, and yet we must live as though they do." His friend nods thoughtfully, sipping his drink. "Maybe that's what makes us human," he replies. You watch the firelight dance across their faces, and it's easy to believe that somewhere in this very city, a young man named Plato is already listening to conversations like these, absorbing them, reshaping them into the dialogues that will echo through history. Further down the street, a procession begins, torches raised, songs rising in unison. At the head, a priest carries a small statue of Dionysus. The god of theater and ecstasy is honored not with solemnity, but with laughter, dancing, and the joy of being alive. Children follow, waving ribbons. Women toss flower petals into the air. The music swells, a mix of flutes and drums, and the sound bounces off the marble walls like a living heartbeat. You realize that this is what binds Athens together. Not just democracy or philosophy, but the shared rhythm of celebration. The theater by day, the festival by night. Both remind the city who it is. As the torches flicker lower, you find a quiet corner by a column and sit for a while, listening. The night breeze carries the scent of smoke and figs, and from somewhere far off, you hear a final song drifting through the darkness. It's a hymn to Dionysus, sung softly now, almost like a lullaby. O ivy-crowned one, bringer of joy, guide our dreams and ease our sorrow. In laughter and wine we find tomorrow. The melody fades, leaving only the whisper of the wind through the olive trees. You close your eyes, letting the remnants of the day settle like dust. The voices, the music, the poetry, all blending into a kind of ancient calm. Somewhere behind your eyelids, the chorus still sings. The actors still bow. And the people of Athens, eternal, talkative, passionate, continue to celebrate the fragile, beautiful art of being human. And as sleep draws near, you realize that the city itself is a theater. Its streets a stage, its people the endless cast. The plays may end, the torches may dim, but the stories of Athens will always find a way to begin again. The last songs of the festival drift away as night deepens over Athens. The sky above the Acropolis is a velvety black, pricked with stars, and the moon hangs low, silvering the marble temples and rooftops. You begin the slow walk back toward the heart of the city, toward the Agora. Even at this late hour, the square hums quietly. The day's chatter has softened into murmurs, the clang of tools replaced by the shuffle of sandals and the occasional bark of a stray dog. The Athenian night has its own kind of rhythm.
You pass a few taverns still open, their flickering oil lamps casting gold patches on the cobblestones. Laughter spills out of one doorway as a group of sailors sing a drinking song in an uneven chorus. A couple of them raise their cups toward you and shout something cheerful about the glory of Athens. You wave back and keep walking. The Agora by moonlight feels different. The crowds are gone, but their presence lingers like a scent. Olive oil, sweat, grilled fish, and debate. The colonnades stand silent now, the columns throwing long shadows across the flagstones. In the center, a single torch burns near the base of a statue of Hermes, patron of merchants, travelers, and, depending on who you ask, thieves. It's under this watchful gaze that another kind of business begins. You notice a few men in cloaks speaking in hushed tones. One of them gestures to a tablet of wax, another counts small coins by touch rather than sight. Deals are still being made, even after dark. Some things, it seems, never change. But not all nighttime gatherings are so secretive. Near the steps of the Stoa Basileos, the royal stoa, two men argue quietly about a recent decree from the assembly. One insists that a new tax is unjust. The other counters that it's necessary to fund the fleet. Their voices rise, but not in anger. Here in Athens, even disagreement has a kind of artistry. You can almost hear Socrates chuckling somewhere in the shadows, ready to ask one more impossible question just to keep the argument alive. You wander closer to the Stoa, the same place where public notices and decrees are posted for all citizens to read. Even now, under torchlight, a few figures stand before the notice boards, scanning the fresh wax impressions pressed with official seals. The city's administration never truly sleeps. One notice announces a new shipment of grain from Egypt, a relief after weeks of tight rations. Another lists upcoming court cases, while a third warns of pirates spotted off Cape Sunion. A young boy reads aloud for an older man who cannot read himself. Literacy in Athens, while admired, is far from universal. Still, everyone wants to know what's happening. In this democracy, information is power, and rumor travels faster than truth. Speaking of rumor, you catch a snippet of gossip from a nearby group of women filling their jugs at a fountain. They whisper about an orator who may have accepted bribes, about a general accused of poor leadership, and about a scandal involving a sculptor and the wife of a merchant. You pretend not to listen, though you do, because everyone does. The women laugh softly, the sound echoing off the stone. In a city that worships reason, it's comforting to know that gossip still rules the night. A dog brushes past your leg, tail wagging lazily. You glance around and see a few shapes moving near the edge of the Agora, figures in simple cloaks carrying spears. These are the Scythian archers, Athens' version of city guards. Ironically, they aren't Greek at all. They're enslaved men from the far north, used by the city to enforce order. Historians still argue whether they were truly respected for their role or quietly resented by the citizens they watched. Either way, they patrol the Agora to keep the peace, though they look more like men trying to stay awake than soldiers on duty. One of them yawns, leaning on his spear. Another shares a laugh with a fruit seller packing up her stall for the night. You can't help but smile. Civilization, it seems, depends as much on small talk as on law. You continue toward the center of the square. The stones are warm beneath your feet, still holding the memory of the sun. You pause at a small altar where someone has left a half-burned candle and a few figs as an offering. The wax has melted into soft puddles, the figs glistening in the moonlight. You're not sure whether the gift was for Hermes, Athena, or perhaps just for luck. But in Athens, all three might listen. Further ahead, a small group of men sits cross-legged on the steps, deep in conversation. You catch fragments as you approach, words like justice, virtue, and the good life. It sounds like philosophy. Perhaps a few followers of Socrates or one of his rivals, continuing their debate long after everyone else has gone home. You sit nearby, pretending to rest, but listening closely. One man, with a voice like gravel, insists that true virtue cannot be taught. Another disagrees, quoting a poet about how a well-trained heart can overcome even the harshest fate. They pause, sip watered wine from a shared cup, and continue their quiet battle of wits.
It strikes you how freely ideas move here. In other cities, such discussions might be secret, even dangerous. But in Athens, the air itself seems to hum with thought. Every argument is a kind of performance, every listener a participant. Even you, silent though you are, feel part of it. You look up at the Acropolis, now gleaming pale against the sky. From this angle, the Parthenon seems almost to float. The city feels eternal in moments like this, peaceful, measured, aglow with its own confidence. Yet beneath the serenity, you sense the pulse of change. Athens is always talking, always questioning, and always at risk of unraveling itself in the process.
Historians still argue whether this ceaseless debate was the city's greatest strength or its undoing. Some say it birthed democracy and philosophy. Others claim it sowed division that no empire could survive. Maybe both are true. A bell chimes somewhere in the distance, soft, metallic, the hour mark for midnight. The marketplace is nearly empty now. The guards have moved on, the taverns have quieted, and even the moon seems to have dimmed. You rise and begin to walk again, the cool night air brushing your skin. You pass the shadowed outline of the mint, where silver coins are struck with the owl of Athena. Nearby, a small group of workers finishes cleaning the area, sweeping away bits of trash, resetting fallen stools, righting baskets. Tomorrow, the Agora will wake again, fresh and bright, as though today's dust never existed. Before you leave, you take one last look around. The torches burn low, their smoke curling lazily into the night. The marble glows faintly, like old bone. A cat darts across the square, chasing something unseen. For a moment, the whole city seems to breathe, slow, steady, alive. You realize how much of Athens' greatness lies not just in its monuments or victories, but in this, the quiet maintenance of daily life, the cleaning, the arguing, the gossiping, the patrolling. Civilization is built as much on ordinary routines as on grand ideals. Somewhere, a rooster crows prematurely, fooled by the moonlight. You chuckle softly, thinking even the animals here are impatient philosophers. As you turn toward home, your footsteps echo against the stones. The Agora behind you fades into stillness, the last flicker of its torches swallowed by the dark. Ahead lies the narrow street leading toward your modest room and a waiting bed. The night guards pass you once more, nodding as they go. For all its arguments, ambitions, and noise, Athens knows how to rest. The city exhales, the stars shimmer, and for a few brief hours, the cradle of democracy dreams. As you leave the Agora behind and wander through quieter streets, the glow of torchlight fades, and you find yourself approaching a series of smaller sanctuaries tucked between homes and workshops. The city's larger temples dominate the skyline. Yes, the Parthenon, the Erechtheion, but Athens is alive with tiny shrines too, each a pocket of devotion in the midst of daily life. Here, the personal meets the divine. You pause at a small altar, no taller than your waist, with a few oil lamps burning faintly. Someone has left a piece of bread, a bit of honey, and a tiny figurine of a seated goddess, probably Athena herself. The offerings are modest, yet each one seems charged with sincerity. You remember the merchant's charm from the marketplace and realize that even in a bustling city, humans have always sought a little reassurance from unseen powers. The smell of olive oil mingles with the faint smoke of incense. A woman kneels nearby, muttering a quiet prayer.
tracing her fingers over a carved stone relief of a deity. Her lips move without urgency. You can't catch her words, but the cadence is familiar, almost comforting, like a lullaby you've half forgotten. Historians still argue whether everyday Athenians truly believed in the gods as literal beings, or whether religion was mostly a social and civic performance. Either way, the gestures matter. You notice small scratches on the stone where countless fingers have pressed before yours. These marks are centuries of devotion and superstition rolled into one. A little further down, you spot a shrine dedicated to Dionysus, adorned with ivy and small pottery cups. Some wine has spilled, leaving dark stains on the stone, and a few crumpled garlands lie discarded nearby. It's easy to imagine that once the celebrants were children, now grown, who came here to honor the god and ask for a good harvest or a safe journey. The scene is faintly comedic: sticky wine on sacred stone, garlands losing their fight against gravity. But it's touching in its humanity. You wander along a narrow lane lined with more shrines. Some are no more than rough stones, others intricately carved with figures of gods, heroes, or animals. A child darts past, leaving a tiny coin atop one altar, then hurries away. You smile. Even small hands have big faith in this city. At one corner, a potter from earlier in the day has placed a tiny amphora on a shrine dedicated to Hephaestus, god of craftsmen. The vessel is plain, unpainted, but polished from use. Perhaps he prays for steady hands tomorrow, or for a kiln that won't crack his latest creation. The thought strikes you. Athenians seem to make offerings for every need: protection, inspiration, luck, even patience. You pass a shrine that seems older than most, worn smooth by countless fingers, its relief almost indecipherable. Someone has left a small piece of cloth, tied in a neat knot. A nearby inscription is faint but legible enough to read a simple dedication: for safe passage, for love, for life. The universal simplicity of this prayer is humbling. A group of men carrying scrolls passes you, perhaps scribes or philosophers returning from a lecture. One of them pauses at a shrine, tilts his head, and murmurs a brief invocation before moving on. It strikes you that belief here exists in many forms: poetry, ritual, and everyday gestures, all mingling seamlessly. The air is cooler now, and the moon hangs high, silvering the columns of the nearby temples. You approach a larger shrine, dedicated to Apollo, where a faint breeze stirs the hanging ivy. A lamp flickers, casting shadows that seem to dance over the carved reliefs. Someone has left small figures of animals: lions, birds, and even a carved frog. Quirky, perhaps, but meaningful. The Athenians believed in do ut des, I give so that you may give. You place your hand on the cool stone, imagining that the gods are listening, even if just a little. It's a quiet reassurance, not a show of power, but a reminder that humans have always wanted to leave something behind, a small connection to the eternal. You wander to another small shrine tucked into a corner, where the offerings are particularly playful: painted pebbles, tiny dolls, even a piece of bread with a smile etched into it. It's whimsical and endearing, evidence that devotion doesn't always require solemnity. Even in a city famous for its philosophers and politicians, there is room for humor and creativity in worship. A priest passes by with a lantern, nodding to the small figures and oil lamps, as though greeting old friends. He is not hurried, not solemn, just attentive. Historians still argue whether these priests held significant power or served mostly as facilitators for the city's rituals. Yet their presence alone carries an authority, a reassurance of continuity. You stop at a shrine dedicated to Hestia, goddess of the hearth, tucked into a quiet corner where smoke from nearby fires rises in gentle spirals. The lamp burns low, the shadows soft. You can almost imagine the warmth of a home, the rhythm of domestic life preserved in stone and flame.
Even in a bustling metropolis, the city honors the intimate, everyday connection between humans and gods.
A few steps away, a vendor packs up her remaining goods, sweeping up stray straw and dust. She pauses to bow her head at a nearby altar, murmuring a prayer for tomorrow's customers. You notice that, in Athens, devotion is often woven into work, not separated from it. It is ordinary life made sacred by intention and attention.
The streets begin to empty further. You walk past the remnants of a small festival offering, scattered petals, extinguished lamps, and half-burned incense. Everything feels suspended in the soft silver glow of moonlight. It's quiet, intimate, and timeless. You realize that the city's temples and shrines, big and small, are not just architectural marvels. They are living spaces, intersections of memory, belief, and community. As you trace your path back toward your room, the cool night air brushing your skin, you take a final glance at the moonlit shrines. Their lamps burn low but steady, much like the city itself. Even when Athens sleeps, these small pockets of devotion remain awake, silently tending to the hopes, fears, and gratitude of the people who built and inhabit this extraordinary place. And for a moment, you feel part of that continuum, a fleeting observer in a city that has always been awake, always thinking, always offering a piece of itself to the divine.
Night has fully settled over Athens, and the streets that were bustling with merchants, philosophers, and festival-goers now hum with a quieter, more intimate rhythm. You wander through alleys that smell faintly of wood smoke and warm bread, following the scent that draws you toward the bakeries. Even in this city of grand temples and soaring philosophies, the daily sustenance of life matters just as much as the lofty ideals.
A small bakery catches your eye, its oven glowing warmly through an open window. You can see the baker's arms dusted with flour, moving rhythmically as he kneads dough. The aroma of fresh barley bread and honey cakes fills the air, a smell so comforting it almost feels like a hug. A group of apprentices is busy shaping loaves, their hands working in unison, occasionally laughing when a lump of dough refuses to cooperate. The baker notices you pausing and nods. "Evening treats for the night watchers," he says, gesturing to a tray of small, round bread rolls glazed with olive oil. You accept one, the soft warmth melting slightly under your fingers, and bite into it. The flavor is simple but profound, a reminder that basic things done well can be deeply satisfying. Nearby, a tavern buzzes with low conversation and the occasional clink of pottery cups. Inside, a mixture of sailors, laborers, and a few local philosophers sip watered wine and discuss the day's events. The tavern is a social hub, a space where people of different walks of life converge, and the hum of chatter is comforting in its constancy. "A group of men recounts a minor altercation from the marketplace earlier," one says, shaking his head. Another laughs, "And the cinnamon wasn't worth half the price. But we survived, didn't we?" You smile at the irony. Commerce and complaints inseparable. Historians still argue whether taverns in Athens were primarily places of leisure or essential civic spaces where news, politics, and ideas were exchanged informally. Either way, the tavern pulses with the life of the city, a quiet engine behind the grand narratives of democracy and philosophy.
You order a small cup of wine and sip it slowly, letting the warmth spread through your chest. The flavor is earthy, a little tart, and slightly sweet. You notice a barmaid moving gracefully between the tables, her hands balancing cups and jugs with remarkable precision. She offers a polite smile as she passes, an unspoken acknowledgement of your presence as a visitor to this nocturnal world.
Just outside, the smell of roasting fish and grilled vegetables drifts through the night air. Street vendors, smaller and less conspicuous than those in the bustling Agora, are still preparing simple meals for late wanderers. A man with a small charcoal grill flips fish that sizzle and spit, their aroma mingling with that of bread and wine. You can't resist stopping to watch, the rhythmic hiss of the cooking almost hypnotic. You notice a family seated on a stone bench nearby, sharing a modest meal. The father carefully divides a loaf of bread, passing slices to the children, while the mother adds a few pieces of roasted olives and figs. The children eat eagerly, their laughter soft and intermittent, blending with the ambient murmur of the street. It's a quiet scene, unremarkable in scale, but extraordinary in intimacy. A snapshot of everyday life across centuries. Somewhere down the lane, a musician plays a simple tune on a lyre, accompanying a young man who hums a low, steady melody. The music weaves through the air, gently touching everyone who passes, as though the city itself is exhaling its collective stories through sound. The combination of bread, wine, and music creates a sensory tapestry that is uniquely Athenian. You pause near a tavern doorway where two men are engaged in animated debate. One insists that the evening bread from the bakery is better than yesterday's. The other protests, claiming that yesterday's honey cake paired with the fig preserves was unsurpassed. Their argument is lighthearted, almost playful, yet you realize that even trivial disputes here carry the weight of pride and habit. A quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found graffiti inside ancient Athenian taverns, including doodles of ships, animals, and humorous complaints about bread and wine. One fragment even reads, "The fig cakes of Marina could wake the dead." It's a reminder that humor and critique were always part of the daily routine. You continue walking, the night air cooling your face. You pass a small stand where a man offers thin slices of cheese on flatbread. He gestures toward a bowl of olives and encourages you to try a piece. The cheese is slightly tangy, the olives briny, and together with the bread, it is a simple, satisfying meal. You can't help but appreciate the way Athens integrates the everyday with the divine. The small ritual of eating, the attention to flavor, and the communal experience. A young poet sits nearby, penning lines on a wax tablet by the light of a small oil lamp. He glances up occasionally, watching passers-by and muttering observations about the city, perhaps to incorporate into his verse. You wonder what his words will become: songs, odes, or scraps lost to time. But in this moment, they add another layer to the nocturnal tapestry of Athens. The streets narrow as you continue, and the smell of roasting barley mingles with the faint aroma of oil lamps. A few families sit in open courtyards, enjoying the cool of the evening. Someone has strung a small lyre across a doorway, and soft music drifts into the street. The contrast between the hustle of the day and the calm of evening is stark, yet comforting. You notice how much of Athens' life revolves around these small, ordinary pleasures: bread, wine, conversation, music, and companionship. The grand temples and public debates may define the city's reputation, but it is these intimate experiences that make it tangible, human, and approachable. As you approach your lodgings, the streets grow quieter still. Only the occasional sound of footsteps or a distant dog breaks the calm. The aroma of the bakeries lingers, a gentle reminder of the city's warmth and generosity. The taverns, now closing, leave behind soft echoes of laughter and conversation, memories of the people who inhabit this nocturnal Athens. You take a final breath, inhaling the mingled scents of bread, wine, and olive trees. The city feels alive, yet tranquil, a complex organism settling into rest. You realize that evening meals, music, and conversation are as vital to the soul of Athens as its laws, philosophy, and temples. It's in these quiet acts that the heartbeat of the city truly resides. The night is almost complete, and you feel a gentle weariness settle in your limbs. The lights of the few remaining torches cast long shadows on the walls, and the stars above watch silently over the city that never entirely sleeps. The city has slipped fully into night, and Athens takes on a different character under the moon's gentle glow. The streets are quieter now, but not entirely silent. Every so often, you hear the soft echo of footsteps along the flagstones, the distant bark of a dog, or the faint clatter of a loose tile settling. You realize that even while most citizens rest, the city never truly sleeps. In the shadows, you notice the night watch moving methodically through the streets. These are the men tasked with keeping order, a visible but unobtrusive presence. Unlike modern police, they are not armed with the threat of imprisonment, but with authority, familiarity, and vigilance. Cloaked and alert, they patrol intersections, marketplaces, and residential areas, making sure that peace holds even in the small hours. Some of the guards are the famed Scythian archers, foreign mercenaries employed by Athens for their loyalty and perceived impartiality. Their bows rest across their shoulders as they walk, and their eyes scan every shadow. It's odd to think that men brought from distant lands, far from home, are entrusted with watching over the city's citizens. Historians still argue whether they were respected for their service or quietly resented, yet their presence is undeniably vital. Other members of the watch are free citizens, tasked as part of civic duty. They patrol with sticks or short spears, moving in slow, deliberate patterns. One pauses to speak quietly with a baker closing his shop. Another waves to a family, ensuring their doors are secured. The watch is as much about reassurance as enforcement, a reminder that the city cares for its people, even after sunset. You walk alongside a small group of guards as they make their rounds near the Agora. The square, now emptied of daytime bustle, looks almost sacred in the torchlight. Shadows stretch across the marble and stone, giving the space a solemn, hushed quality. You notice a faint imprint of footprints in the dust from earlier activities. The day's life still lingering, evidence that Athens is alive even when empty. The guards pass by the stoa basileos, where decrees and public notices are displayed. They pause to check that all tablets are still in place and nothing has been disturbed. A few scraps of wax have fallen from a recent announcement, but otherwise the public order remains intact. In a city where debate and opinion flow freely, maintaining physical order is a delicate balance. Even in sleep, the city cannot resist gossip. Their camaraderie is easy, and their laughter blends with the quiet night, a gentle contrast to the weight of responsibility they carry. A curious detail emerges as you follow them further. Small lanterns are lit at strategic corners and near shrines, ensuring that the city's paths remain visible and safe. Even isolated sanctuaries and offerings are given a measure of protection. You notice a shrine to Athena tucked into a narrow alley, its oil lamp flickering steadily, watched over by a solitary guard. The juxtaposition is poetic, the divine and civic order intertwined under the same torchlight. The night watch also performs more practical tasks. You see them ensuring that gates are properly secured, checking that merchant stalls are emptied, and sweeping stray debris from the main streets. Athens takes pride in its clean, organized spaces, and even at night, someone is responsible for preserving that sense of order. Occasionally, the guards pause to engage citizens. A young man carrying a jug of water for his household receives a nod of recognition. A group of late-night workers returning from a pottery workshop exchanges quiet greetings. These interactions are brief but meaningful, a reminder that authority in Athens is rarely oppressive, often collaborative. You notice a particularly watchful pair of archers stationed near the city's edge, overlooking a path leading to the Piraeus. Their eyes are alert for pirates or thieves who might threaten the city's safety. Athens, after all, thrives on trade, and the port must remain secure even while most of the city sleeps. A soft breeze carries the faint smell of sea salt and fish, a reminder of the wider world that continues beyond the city walls.
As you continue, you pass a lone philosopher walking slowly toward the Agora. He pauses to observe the patrol, as if taking notes on human behavior. Historians still argue whether late-night walks like these were part of philosophical reflection or merely a way to enjoy the quiet streets. Either way, you get the sense that Athens' intellectual life never truly rests.
Further down, the guards check on tavern owners who remain awake, finishing tasks or quietly celebrating the day's earnings. A barmaid bows her head slightly in acknowledgement, and the watch responds with a nod, maintaining a respectful distance. It's clear that authority here is subtle, present yet unobtrusive, ensuring peace without stifling the city's character. You pause near a small fountain where the water trickles softly into a stone basin. One of the guards stops beside it, filling his own cup and splashing some on the pavement as a simple offering for the gods. It's a gesture both practical and spiritual, a reminder that even city watchmen carry the rituals of Athens with them. The streets grow quieter still, and the city seems to hold its breath. You notice the small, subtle rhythms of life. A cat slinking past, a faint echo of a distant lyre, the soft shuffle of sandals. Every sound, every movement is amplified by the stillness. In this environment, the night watch is both guardian and witness, their presence preserving not just safety, but the sense of continuity that makes Athens feel eternal. You reflect on the balance the city maintains: freedom and order, philosophy and protection, commerce and ritual. The night watch is part of that balance, ensuring that Athens can awaken again each day, ready for debate, trade, and celebration.
Finally, you reach a quiet square near the city's heart. The patrol moves on, leaving only the soft whisper of wind through olive trees and the faint murmur of distant voices. The city feels alive yet at rest, a paradox held in perfect harmony. You realize that this is the unseen backbone of Athens: the tireless care, the quiet vigilance, the order maintained without pomp or spectacle. For a few moments, you stand still and absorb it. The torchlight flickering on marble, the distant stars mirrored in the puddles from earlier rain, the whisper of the city breathing as one. Athens may sleep in its citizens' homes, but the city itself, watched over by its guardians, remains awake, thoughtful, steady, and unbroken. The first pale light of dawn stretches across Athens like a tentative promise. Shadows retreat slowly from the cobblestones, and the city exhales, stirring awake after the night's stillness. You walk through the quiet streets, noticing the subtle transformations that signal a new day. It is a delicate orchestration, smells, sounds, and movements blending seamlessly to awaken the Agora and the city beyond. Bakers are the earliest risers. From their open windows, the smell of warm barley bread and honey cakes begins to drift into the streets. Apprentices stretch and knead dough, their movements rhythmic and precise, the kind of early morning dance that requires neither music nor instruction. A tray of fresh loaves slides from the oven, golden and steaming, and a man carrying it down the street carefully avoids the puddles left from the night's mist. Nearby, a group of vendors arranges their stalls for the day's market. You watch as one woman spreads a woven mat and places baskets of olives in neat rows. Another carefully stacks pottery, eyeing each piece to ensure that it balances without wobbling. The scene is calm but purposeful, a choreography repeated countless mornings. Even the smallest misstep, a dropped fig or a tilted amphora, would disrupt the rhythm, and in Athens, rhythm matters as much as skill. A few tavern owners begin to stir as well, sweeping the previous night's remnants from their doorsteps and resetting tables for early patrons. You notice a faint smudge of wine on the stone, probably from the festival the night before. One barmaid bends to scrub it, humming a soft melody under her breath. It is ordinary, domestic work, but there is pride in its careful execution.
Historians still argue whether such morning routines were purely practical or a subtle way to honor the gods of daily life. But in either case, they shaped the city's character.
The Agora itself is slowly coming alive. Stone steps that felt cold and lifeless in the moonlight now glow faintly in the sun's first rays. Merchants begin to arrange goods, textiles, ceramics, fruits, and spices. You notice a man with a bundle of imported pepper from Phoenicia, carefully weighing each portion on a small scale. Nearby, a woman unfurls vibrant dyed fabrics, the colors bright in the early light. Even the mundane act of laying out merchandise carries a rhythm and artistry that make the city feel alive.
You pass a small shrine tucked between two stalls, where the flickering remains of an oil lamp signal that someone stayed behind last night to leave an offering. Fresh flowers have been placed carefully beside it, and the scent is faint but unmistakable. Small gestures like these, repeated across Athens, tie the sacred to the mundane in a seamless web. A child hurries past, balancing a small coin on her palm, stopping briefly to leave it at the shrine. It's an instinctive act of devotion, small yet meaningful, a thread in the city's tapestry. Street sweepers begin their work, brushing away dust and stray leaves from the flagstones. Their brooms scrape softly, creating a gentle, almost musical rhythm. You notice that even in these simple tasks, care is given to detail. A clean street signals more than just order. It signals respect for the space itself, for the city, and for those who will walk it.
The first customers appear. A man hurrying to buy fresh bread, a woman with a basket of herbs stopping to select olives, and a young philosopher carrying a scroll, pausing to greet the baker. Even early in the morning, the Agora functions as the city's social hub. Conversations begin gently, almost like birds waking at sunrise. First a murmur, then a chorus. Quirky details emerge. A street performer practices juggling small clay cups, carefully testing his dexterity while drawing a few amused onlookers. Nearby, a dog pads along silently, weaving between stalls, seemingly approved by every merchant it passes. You notice a small graffiti etched onto a corner of a wall, probably from yesterday. If your figs are sour, blame the gods, not the baker. It's the humor that persists even in the city's earliest hours, a reminder that Athens is a place of wit as much as work. The light strengthens, casting golden highlights on the Parthenon and the surrounding temples. You glance at the Acropolis and notice the guards stationed there, still vigilant even in early morning. Their eyes scan the horizon, ensuring that the city is safe before most citizens even open their eyes. Order and vigilance coexist with the awakening bustle, a subtle balance that defines Athens. You pause at a small fountain where water trickles into a stone basin, reflecting the dawn sky. Children arrive, carrying jugs for their families. They chat quietly, dipping their hands into the cool water and giggling at their reflections. It's a scene of innocent routine, a rhythm repeated across countless households. You notice a few older citizens observing from nearby steps, offering guidance and occasional corrections, their presence both protective and instructive. The air carries the sense of bread, herbs, and early flowers from the gardens tucked behind homes. You inhale deeply, feeling a calm anticipation. Athens is readying itself for a new day of trade, debate, and daily life. Even the smallest details, the careful arrangement of goods, the offerings left at shrines, the sweep of a broom, signal that this city is alive in every sense. As more people fill the streets, the Agora begins to hum with quiet energy. Voices rise in conversation, coins jingle. The sound of goods being arranged mixes with early footsteps. You realize that this early dawn, often overlooked by those who focus on battles or debates, is when Athens truly sustains itself. It's in these careful preparations, repeated day after day, that the city endures. And as the sun climbs higher, the shadows retreat fully, revealing the Agora in its morning brilliance. Merchants stand ready, bakers display their wares, philosophers prepare for public discussion, and citizens move through their routines. The city's pulse quickens, a slow crescendo from the night's calm into the day's bustle. You pause and take it all in, understanding that dawn in Athens is more than a time. It is a performance, a ritual, and a renewal of the life of the city itself. With the city fully awake, you wander through the lanes and alleys where craftsmen and artisans have already begun their day. The sounds of Athens shift subtly. The hum of the Agora continues, but now it is punctuated by the rhythmic clatter of tools, the scraping of stone, the measured strikes of a hammer on bronze. Each sound contributes to the living orchestra of the city, a symphony of creation that fills the morning air. You pause near a small bronze workshop tucked into a corner. Inside, a smith hammers tirelessly at a glowing piece of metal, sparks dancing briefly in the morning light. The sound is sharp, metallic, yet there is a rhythm to it, a steady pulse like a heartbeat. Apprentices fan the forge, adding air to the flames, while one carefully polishes a small bronze figurine, watching for any flaw. It is meticulous work, but the smith moves with ease, as if his body itself has memorized every strike. Nearby, a potter shapes a new amphora on a wheel, wet clay spinning slowly under skilled hands. Each curve, each indentation is precise yet fluid. You notice the pottery is not just functional. It carries decoration, symbols, and even tiny inscriptions, demonstrating both craftsmanship and personal expression. A small, playful depiction of a dancing satyr draws your eye, a whimsical nod to the city's love of theater and revelry. Historians still argue whether these decorative touches were purely aesthetic or carried deeper symbolic meaning, but their charm is undeniable. In a neighboring lane, a carpenter works on a simple yet elegant stool. His tools, a plane, a chisel, a mallet, lie neatly arranged beside him, worn from repeated use. You watch as he fits the final joint with care, pressing the wood until it aligns perfectly. The precision is almost hypnotic, and you notice a small scratch on the leg of the stool, likely a signature mark, a subtle way for craftsmen to claim their work. Even in mundane objects, pride and artistry are intertwined. A mosaic workshop nearby buzzes with quiet concentration. Artisans kneel on the floor, carefully placing tiny stones to form intricate patterns of geometric shapes and mythological scenes. The pieces catch the sunlight streaming through the workshop window, creating tiny flashes of color and light. It occurs to you that each mosaic, though small, represents a fragment of Athens' collective imagination, a city translating its stories, gods, and values into tangible beauty. You pause at a leatherworker's stall. The smell of tanned hide is sharp but familiar. He works quietly, stitching and shaping sandals for a customer, occasionally pausing to smooth a rough edge. One sandal bears a peculiar mark, a stylized owl, perhaps a tribute to Athena. Quirky details like this appear in countless workshops, small signatures or symbols that make everyday objects unique. A nearby sculptor chisels a block of marble into the beginnings of a statue. You watch fine white dust rise in the sunlight, settling slowly on the workshop floor. Each strike of the hammer seems deliberate, meditative, almost musical. Occasionally, the sculptor steps back, wiping his brow and squinting at the evolving figure, judging proportions and symmetry. The city thrives on these small acts of creation, from the essential to the sublime. You wander further, noticing how the workshops and artisans are not isolated. They form a network, a web of interdependent skills. A basket maker's wares might hold olives from the market. A potter's amphoras might carry wine. A leatherworker's sandals support the feet of philosophers heading to the Agora. Every craft contributes to the city's daily life, forming an invisible thread of sustenance, commerce, and culture. In some workshops, small figurines or charms are tucked into finished pieces, a superstition or playful signature to bless the object. One mosaic has a hidden frog cleverly embedded among vines. One sculptor carves tiny footprints into the base of a statue as a joke for future viewers. These whimsical touches remind you that even in precise labor, Athenians valued humor and personality. The streets themselves seem to mirror the craftspeople's rhythms. You pass a blacksmith who pounds in steady time with the potter's wheel spinning nearby, creating an unintentional symphony of the city at work. A young apprentice hums a tune, his voice blending with the clatter and scrape, almost like a modern ASMR session centuries early. Even the act of repair is an art. A mason repairs a broken step, carefully chiseling and fitting new stone so that it matches the old perfectly. A weaver mends a torn cloak with thread dyed in subtle patterns, almost invisible but essential to the garment's integrity. Every repair, like every new creation, is a conversation with the past and a promise to the future. You notice a small shrine tucked near a potter's wheel, where a tiny figurine of Hephaestus, god of craftsmen, has been placed. The artisan pauses, brushing his hands briefly over it, a private acknowledgement of the divine in his labor. It is small, almost unnoticed, but profoundly human, a reminder that even in ordinary work, Athenians sought connection to something larger. The city gradually grows louder as more people take to the streets. Merchants call out their goods, apprentices run errands between workshops, and citizens move purposefully toward the Agora. Yet, despite the noise, there is a sense of harmony, a rhythm established by centuries of routine and observation. Each craft, each sound contributes to the orchestration of daily life. By mid-morning, the artisan's work is fully integrated into the city's pulse. Amphora are stacked for transport, bronze figurines gleam in the sunlight, textiles flutter from their display stands, and mosaics await delivery to temples or wealthy homes. You step back, realizing that these humble acts of creation, hammering, carving, weaving, shaping, sustain not just the physical city, but its culture, identity, and continuity. Athens' greatness, it seems, is as much in its craftspeople as in its philosophers, politicians, and generals. The quiet dedication of these artisans, their skill, attention, and sometimes playful quirks underpins the life of the city in ways that are easy to overlook but impossible to ignore once noticed. You take a deep breath, inhaling the mingled scents of clay, leather, metal, and oil. The morning sun reflects off polished surfaces, highlighting the beauty in labor. You realize that in Athens, art and utility, playfulness and precision, the sacred and the ordinary all coexist seamlessly. And as you walk on, leaving the workshops behind for the bustling Agora once more, you carry with you the sense that the city's heartbeat is created not just by its citizens, but by the hands that craft, shape, and repair its world day after day. The sun climbs high, spilling light over the Agora in brilliant patterns across the marble and stone. Shadows retreat under the authority of day, and the marketplace thrums with activity once more. Merchants call out their wares, stallholders adjust their goods to catch the sunlight just right, and citizens move through the square with purpose, engaging in both business and conversation. You wander among them, absorbing the layered textures of sound, color, and motion. You pause for a moment to reflect on all you've observed over the past hours. Athens is alive, not only because of its monuments or temples, but because of its people. Bakers, craftsmen, philosophers, guards, children, and families, each contributing to the pulse of the city. You watch a child carefully select figs from a stall, mimicking the gestures of a parent, learning the rhythm of market life. Even small gestures, the careful weighing of spices, the polite exchange of coins, carry significance, anchoring the day's larger narratives in the ordinary.
The smell of roasted grain drifts from a nearby bakery, mingling with the faint aroma of olive oil and herbs from the food stalls. You pause to inhale, savoring the sensory layers that have defined your journey through the Agora. The rhythm of daily life, commerce, conversation, and creation feels both timeless and delicate. Historians still argue whether the daily routines of Athens were as ritualized as their sacred festivals or simply practical habits. But observing them now, you understand the subtle magic of repetition and care. Nearby, a group of philosophers debates quietly under the shade of a stoa. One gestures toward a pot of honey and bread, illustrating a point about moderation. Another counters with a discussion of virtue and civic life. You realize that Athens' intellectual energy does not reside solely in formal assemblies or grand speeches. It exists in small, accessible debates that happen naturally among citizens, as unhurried and thoughtful as the city itself.
You move through the crowd, noting how ordinary items are elevated by context. A simple amphora gleaming in the sun, a string of olives laid neatly in a basket, a carved figurine propped against a shrine. Each object is a small story, a tangible piece of culture, a reflection of the city's values and humor. A merchant smiles as you admire a particularly whimsical statuette depicting a dancing satyr with an exaggerated grin. Athenians, it seems, never lost their playful side, even amid commerce and toil.
The street cleaners sweep diligently, their brooms moving in soft arcs across the stones, erasing the dust and debris of the morning. You notice how their work harmonizes with the rhythm of the market, almost choreographed to the movements of passers-by and merchants alike. Athens thrives on this quiet synchronization, a city continually remade through attention to detail. As you wander, you pass a small shrine tucked near a fountain. Fresh water ripples softly, and someone has left a few coins and a sprig of rosemary, perhaps as thanks or a request for protection. Even amid the bustling midday activity, these pockets of devotion maintain a gentle pause, a moment for reflection. You touch the smooth stone, feeling the layers of human interaction that have accumulated over decades, centuries, perhaps millennia. A baker pauses to exchange greetings with a customer, their hands brushing briefly as bread is passed. A musician begins strumming a lyre near the steps of the stoa, his melody light and calming, threading through the market noise like a subtle undercurrent. You notice a cat weaving between stalls, weaving its own quiet path through the human activity, alert and patient. These details, the gestures, the small sounds, the animals, are as much a part of Athens as its columns and statues. Quirky tidbit in the corner sets out a small amphora decorated with tiny carvings of animals, perhaps a gift for a loyal customer, or perhaps a playful addition to his display. Little moments like these reveal the human whimsy that persists even amid trade and business. You smile at the thought that Athens is built not only on laws and debates, but on humor, care, and the small acts of generosity and creativity that punctuate daily life. As midday approaches its peak, the sun casts long shadows from the stoa and columns. You notice the guards moving discreetly through the square, their presence calming rather than commanding. They patrol with a gentle attentiveness, a subtle reminder that order underpins freedom. You catch a brief exchange. A guard speaks softly with a merchant about an upcoming festival, sharing information that is practical and reassuring. Even in their vigilance, the guards are integrated into the rhythm of civic life. You pause near a fountain, the cool water reflecting sunlight in dancing patterns. Children splash lightly, careful not to disturb the coins left for the gods. A woman fetches water, pausing to leave a small sprig of laurel, whispering a brief prayer. You feel the interplay of the ordinary and the sacred,
how personal acts of care, devotion, and reflection are seamlessly woven into the public sphere. The market continues to hum around you. Merchants haggle gently, apprentices run errands, and philosophers pause briefly to watch and learn. Even in the middle of this busy square, there is a sense of calm, a rhythm established not by silence, but by attentive presence. Every footstep, every exchange, every small gesture contributes to the continuity of the city. As the sun begins its descent, you take a slow breath, letting the sounds, smells, and rhythms of Athens settle around you. The city is alive, vibrant, thoughtful, and human. Its greatness is not only in its temples or debates, but in the care, attention, and creativity woven through daily life. And as you prepare to step away, the memory of the Agora remains vivid, a living, breathing space where ordinary acts are extraordinary, and where every citizen, craftsman, child, and philosopher participates in the ongoing story of the city. The light softens, and you feel a gentle weariness settle in. It is time to let the day fade gently, to rest with the memory of Athens' calm beauty lingering like a quiet song. Remember the subtle rhythms, the way the merchants' voices rose and fell, the soft glimmer of sunlight on polished amphorae, the murmur of water in fountains, and the playful signs left by artisans. Let them drift into your mind like a lullaby. Take a deep, steady breath. The Agora, though bustling and vibrant, is a part of the city's endless cycle of life and care. Its rhythm, its attention to detail, and its humanity can be carried with you as you rest. Let your eyelids grow heavy, your muscles relax, and your mind ease into the calm pulse of Athens itself. Now, imagine the warmth of the sun fading gently into a soft afternoon, shadows lengthening, and the city slowly sighing with satisfaction at another day well lived. The voices quiet, the footsteps soften, and a gentle hush spreads over the stones. The Agora rests for a moment, and you rest with it, letting the calm and gentle rhythms of life settle in. Feel the lingering warmth of the morning sun as it gives way to the softness of the afternoon. The city exhales slowly, a gentle sigh of routine completed, and you allow your own body to release the tension of the day. Your thoughts drift lazily through the streets, the colonnades, and the small shrines you passed, each one a reminder that life's small details matter. Let your mind float over the hum of the marketplace, the quiet rhythm of craftsmen, and the soft trickle of fountains. Picture the way sunlight glints on polished bronze, the playful carvings hidden in mosaics, and the children laughing as they dart through the streets. Each sound, smell, and movement becomes softer, slower, a lullaby woven from the ordinary acts of an extraordinary city. Even the bustling Agora can feel gentle when seen through the lens of reflection. Merchants, philosophers, guards, and families, all part of the living rhythm, all contributing to the calm energy that underpins the city's greatness. You feel a sense of peace settle over you, a reassurance that the world, in its ordinary details, carries both beauty and continuity. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let yourself drift into the quiet pulse of Athens. Feel your eyelids grow heavy as the city, its streets, and its people lull you gently. Let the scents, sounds, and rhythms fade into dreams, carrying with you the calm and steady heartbeat of the Agora. End of script. Sweet dreams.